point, I want to introduce Linda Luke. She is our president of BWS, and she has a couple of words to say to you.
Hi, welcome, welcome. I'm so grateful to be able to share this evening with all of you. As you know, the Baltimore Watercolor Society is involved with so many things. I'll just do a little highlight with some of the things that are coming up. There's more workshops, exhibits for members and signature members, demonstrations, Zoom and in person coming up this year and next year. And we are going to go back to New York City in April to see the American Watercolor Society exhibit. So hopefully you can join us. It's a wonderful trip, day to be away. This evening, Russell Jewell, the judge and juror of the Mid-Atlantic this year, did an outstanding job, as we knew that he would, with the many, many paintings. So this evening, he will be explaining his process of how he came to make these decisions. So, like, I'm taking my pen and my paper and taking lots of notes to hope to learn a lot from Russell. I'd like to, at this time, introduce our chairman of the Mid-Atlantic, Jim Sanford. Enjoy your evening.
So yes, I'll introduce Russell. Most of you have had a chance to meet him at one time or another, or at least to read the stuff on the website about him. So I'm not going to be repetitive to that. I just want to put this up for a moment. This is what Russell wrote way back last January when I asked him, to kind of to introduce himself and well, and after he chose the awards, he wrote this detail about it. I love the river analogy, the river of art analogy. When I first read this thing, I said, "Boy, he really nailed it. This is great." And every time I've gone back and looked at this since then, I'm still impressed. So, as far as I'm concerned, tonight is a continuation of this. Russell's got some well thought out philosophies here. And I'm going to turn it over to Russell without further ado. We have selected about a dozen, not all of the prize winning paintings, and we're going to cycle through those. If we're getting toward the end and you just haven't seen something that you really want some comments on, send me a chat and we'll see if we can squeeze it in. Although, try to make the chat more specific than I would like you to critique this particular painting or something like that. So, Russell, hopefully you can hear me and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Okay, very good. Well, I would like to begin by thanking April and Jim and Linda and Donna as well for having me and trusting in me to come and judge the Baltimore Watercolor Society show. The Mid-Atlantic Regional exhibition was just very inspirational to me. I want all the artists to know that you go in and you judge a show, but you're also an artist and you're also a viewer, and at the same time, you're trying to get as much as you can from it. So I don't want to think that I'm the only person here teaching. I'm also the person that is learning, and will continue to learn. That is one of my goals, to be a lifelong learner. Um, there were, I think, nearly 400 pieces. And of course, I know there's a few people that are excited about tonight, excited about the reception and the awards that were given. And I'm sure there are people who, being a judge, you're a few people's friend, and a lot of people question your choices. And I understand that. And I want you to know I've been in your shoes, and I'm going to tell a story or two about being in your shoes so that maybe you can appreciate the fact that I understand where you're coming from. I do often wonder, though, why do we do this? Why do we put ourselves into this? And what's the purpose of putting our work in a show? Just yesterday, I don't know if you know, but yesterday was, I think, the deadline for American Watercolor Society. And I squeezed a piece in that I'd done and got it in at about 10 o'clock yesterday. I think 12 o'clock was the deadline. And so I'm in your shoes. I know what you're feeling. And I will give you some examples that my second piece that I got in American Watercolor Society, which got me signature membership, was turned down. That same piece was turned down the year before. And I just felt like it was a pretty strong piece. And I thought, I'm going to enter it a second time, right in behind it the very next year. And the very next year, I was able to be successful, and that piece was accepted. So I hope to encourage people to continue to show their work. And I think about that, why do we show our work? And I think one of the key things is validation. What does it take to validate us as an artist? Does it take awards? Does it take just creativity? Does it take family and friends to acknowledge us? All those things are important. But validation, I think, comes even from being creative enough just to make sure that we're human. I think, Jim mentioned the river of art, and that is one way that I describe where we are when I teach a workshop, because I think that river began in the caves of Lascaux in France, and so it continues today, and we're a part of that river. But why did they do it then? Why cave art? Um, and maybe it was validation then as well. There's a debate. What came first? Did religion come first, or did art come first? Did somebody make a mark and then it becomes a religious entity? We don't know. But I think the two of those things, both art and religion and validation, those things are very close akin to each other. So we need to be aware of that I think part of doing this is part of saying, I'm human, I create, and oh, did you see what I created? Um, so I just hope that you're inspired by what you see tonight as well. Um, but I have been in your shoes. One story that's kind of humorous, I think. Some of you might be familiar with George James. George James was sort of the founder of UPO. I don't know if you can Google him and take a look at George's work. George passed away a few years back, but George had a student. He was a professor out in California, and George had a student who came along with some paper that was from a printing company that had a plastic sense to it. And he started playing around with watercolor on this piece of plastic and coming up with different processes to work with UPO. And so I wound up taking George's workshop. He came to South Carolina Watercolor Society and judged our show, and I took his workshop. And the day that he was teaching the workshop, I was standing beside him. He had seen what I'd done. It might have been like on a Wednesday, and we'd already had a couple of days of the workshop, so he had seen some of my work. And one of the ladies walks in, and I look up and I said, George, you might want to excuse yourself. And he says, what are you talking about? And I said, well, here comes the ladies, and they have the rejection notices and the acceptance letters, and they're passing them out right here at the workshop. And so, George, no more had I said that than the envelope falls on my desk, and it's in an envelope, so it's closed up. And George grabs it. He just grabs it, and he tears it open and hands it to me. And lo and behold, it was a rejection. And so he looks at me and he said, "Oh my gosh, I've got to go down here. We got to go see why I rejected this piece." So the pieces were still in the floor from him judging the workshop, judging the show. And we go down and he looks at it and he says, "Oh, yeah, I hated that frame." So, that kind of made me feel good. Maybe my work was validated, but my frame was not. So I understand where you're coming from, and I hope that you can appreciate some of my thoughts because it is just one person's thoughts tonight. It's not a group thought, it is one person's thought tonight in terms of the artwork. But I am a plein air artist. I have 36 years of teaching experience at the secondary level, which I taught advanced placement, well, three courses of advanced placement. So I have that experience, and I have a doctorate degree in art ed from the University of Georgia. So I've spread myself around the art world a little bit, but I really try to pay respect to my teachers. A lot of times you hear the word self-taught thrown around in a lot of art meetings, and so I often think, well, self-taught sounds good, but I'm not sure who else would I want to work with that was self-taught. I got my gallbladder out not too long ago, and I'm not sure I would have wanted to hear the doctor say, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to take your gallbladder out, and don't worry, I'm self-taught." So I'm not sure that would have been the best results of that. So I do appreciate the opportunity to learn. Hopefully, I'm going to spread some things to you a little bit tonight about learning as well. Um, one of the things I like to think about in terms of art is, the viewer. How does the viewer approach the artwork? Uh, I think when we look at our own artwork, we can't unsee it as something we created. We keep seeing the spots that we don't like. We see the spots that we do like. We can't see it in an unbiased way. And a lot of times I think of, well, I would like to be able to see this as just a pure viewer. And that's what I got to do to your work tonight is I was able to look at it as just a viewer without knowing who the artist was, without knowing a lot of information about the piece, and just taking the piece for the sake of visual value. Um, it kind of reminds me of a story. Some of you might know Jeremy Sams. Jeremy Sams is an acrylic artist up in High Point, North Carolina. He's a plein air painter. He and I have painted together on several occasions. And I often think about the story with Jeremy. Jeremy and I, we wound up painting together in a backyard up in the mountains of an old fella's place. And he had this beautiful scenery in the back with a field, and the sun was beaming down, and it was just incredible. And Jeremy, he decides to paint that scene. And then I look around trying to find a place to paint, and I see he's got an old Airstream trailer. And those Airstreams, they're highly reflective and they show up in the sunlight. And I thought, well, I'm going to paint that Airstream. Well, both of us finished the paintings, and we go to see the fellow that owned the property. And I don't know if I would have asked him, but Jeremy said, well, which one do you like? Which one do you like? And the old fella, he looks at the paintings and he thinks for just a minute and he says, well, now, Jeremy, he said, that painting you've got right there, he said, that painting, that is God's artwork. He said, but you know what? That's my Airstream. So that's how we are sometimes. It's hard to unsee our own artwork and see it in the beauty that it might really be in. And that's why it's important to have a judge. That's why it's important to have criticism. That's why it's important to share our artwork with others and not hide it somewhere, but get it out and allow other people to see our artwork and communicate with them. So with that being said, I like to pay tribute to my teachers, and I hope you pay tribute to yours as well. And don't be afraid to do that. We are all learning. One of my teachers at the University of Georgia, you may or may not have heard of this man, but his name was Edmund Feldman, Dr. Feldman. You can Google Dr. Feldman, and he comes up all over the internet because he had the Feldman method of art criticism. The Feldman method of art criticism. He was well known for his breaking down how to look at artwork. He was on my committee for my dissertation. And so I got to know him really well. And I broke his method down a little bit further just for high school students to put it on that level. And I called it the aesthetic light, Lite, the aesthetic light. And the way that goes is the L stood for literal qualities, looking at things, not looking for a realism per se, but looking how realistic something is. Is it abstracted? Is it meant to be real? Does it go all the way to the point of non-objective? And just taking a moment to see if I can see everything in the artwork. The I in LITE stands for important formal qualities. The formal qualities are those elements and principles of design. And I can almost sense that I feel some eye rolling when I say elements and principles, because I think sometimes we kind of throw that in and we get tired of hearing, oh, it's all about the elements and principles. But I'm hoping that you understand that if you're looking at a painted apple, you're still really only looking at red paint. You're still looking at paint. If that was pixelated, you got a close-up look at it, you would only be looking at a few pixels, a few pieces of color at one time. And so therefore color is an element of design. Texture, line, space, shape, value, form, those are elements. And then, balance, emphasis, pattern, movement, unity, rhythm. Those are the principles. So I'm looking for those and I'm saying, how has this artist used these? How are they connecting these things together to make a piece of artwork? It's kind of funny when you think about it. When we think about art, we think about non-objective and abstract, and we look in our closet and we find clothes that are pretty much based on elements and principles of design. Most of your clothes are probably about texture and color and shape and value. That's what we buy our clothes on. But sometimes we struggle with thinking about those in regards to art because we start putting a subject on it. I got tickled one time when I taught about Jackson Pollock, and we had our students throw some paint, and when the parents came to see the artwork, there was one lady who had a little bit of a problem with that, and she was just saying, "I just don't get it." And then I looked, and she was wearing a tie-dye shirt, and I thought, "Wait a minute, what do you not get? You're wearing it." So the idea is, yes, we might be looking at tonight at an animal or a person or a landscape, but all of that is still made up of elements and principles, simply paint on a page. So L, I, and T. T is technical qualities. How has the artwork been used? What are some of the techniques? And then finally, expressive qualities, the E, Lite, expressive qualities. And expressive qualities is not how do I feel about the artwork, because I might be having a bad day, but what feeling does the artwork project? So those are the main things, Lite, okay, that I'm looking for as I begin to critique a piece of artwork. So as I go through some of these tonight, I will mention some of those Lite, some of those phrases and some of those terms, but at the same time, I may not be so direct. I don't want to bore you with it, all right? So we're going to begin tonight by looking at Twilight Magic. Twilight Magic was one of the Memorial Awards, and again, you can see that Twilight Magic, remember now, you've got to look at this in relationship to 399 other pieces of artwork. What is going to make this piece stand out? And what makes this piece stand out is the color and the value change and the brightness of it. Also, it's not a realistic piece. So under literal qualities, I'm not looking at how realistic it is, but I am recognizing some of the things that I see. I see a landscape. I see a light source. I see floating objects. Is that dust in the air? Is that fireflies? Is the sun setting in the background, or is that just one more firefly in movement? I'm not sure, but it does give that illustrative feel of a storybook. And so it has that high contrast of color, and there is an expressive idea that this is about some excitement about the light, about the magic that's happening here. And notice that those terms also appear in the title. So we might also talk about titles and the fact that they are fairly important tonight. So, Jim, if we can go ahead and change, we'll go to the next slide. So immediately we go to a slide that is more recognizable in terms of literal qualities. And so we have resting among kindred spirits. Wonderful piece here. As I look at this piece, obviously the dog is here. The body language of the dog speaks volumes in terms of the expressiveness. Notice that the dog does not look at you, but the dog looks off into the distance. In terms of uh, literal qualities, the dog is very realistic and very quiet, and he's in this kind of dream state, resting. But at the same time, technically, notice the white line that comes directly to his head to draw our attention to it. Also, the fold of the chair that wraps around his head and creates a focal point there. But I love the fact that he's not looking at me because he's actually in thought for himself because of what he's sitting in. It's the chair. The chair he's sitting in has all of his imaginary friends. Now, there is a funny little assignment that I gave my students that relates to this. And who knows? That may be why I chose this piece. I am a human. I do have my own feelings when I look at these things. So would I choose the same pieces over again if I looked at the same 400 pieces? Probably not. But with this piece, I had been to a show at one time, and as you walked in the show, I saw a huge dog imagery, and it was like 5 feet by 3 feet, and from a distance, it's definitely a dog. But I walked up and I realized it was painted on cats. So there were images of the cat in the background, but you had to get close enough to see those cats, and the whole thing was a big dog. So here the dog's not worried about cats, but he's got a life of his own, thinking about his friends. Beautiful piece here by Jane Kuntz, Resting Among Kindred Spirits. All right, Jim. Well, Mr. Stephen Hanks. I don't know if Stephen's in the congregation tonight, but this is a really unique painting. I hope a lot of you got to see the works in regards to actually going to the show, because that was part of my experience as well. You got to, and this is something that we all need to think about when we're entering a show, and that is one, the judge is going to choose a variety of subject matter. The judge is going to choose a variety of techniques. In our case, the judge may choose a variety of medium in regards to paper or UPO or acrylic. Um, so with this piece, I felt like there were a lot of questions about, oh, wow, tell us why you chose this piece, or what are you thinking about with this piece? And there was certainly some humor in regards of choosing this piece. But I look at this piece and I think Mr. Hanks, who I do not know, seems to be a very confident painter in the fact that he feels good about what he's projecting here. And we've got this huge image. It is a large piece. And the head is obviously not realistic per se, so literal qualities. We're looking at being very expressive. We're looking at very illustrative. But we do have a single light source moving from right to left. So if you're going to play this game of being semi-abstracted, then if you have a continuous light source that's believable, then the abstract becomes believable. Speaking of that, let's address abstract for just a minute, the word abstract. When you think of the word abstract, in reality, it must be something that I recognize that is abstracted. Okay? Non-objective would mean no object. All right? So this is an abstract piece, even though there's recognizable imagery here. So just that might help some of you get a feel about, well, what is abstract art and what is not abstract art and what is non-objective. So we do recognize the subject here. I don't know the story. I'm sure there's a story behind this. There's certainly a relationship between the two figures. But I love the confidence in what is happening here with the painting, and that is the freedom to have an enjoyment of this painting. High contrast, large darks, making this piece pop. Notice what he's able to do here. He's able to throw all kinds of paint, all kinds of color, all kinds of texture, as long as he's got these darks that are nailing it down and tying it together. So these darks allow him to push the paint to a degree that some people would be afraid to do. But he's holding it all together, and the size of the head also helps it to hold together because we know what a face looks like. So I'll have to try to meet Stephen Hanks. I love the piece, and I think it shows a great amount of determination and confidence in his work. All right, Jim? All right, fire and ice. Well, Teresa here she's kind of fooling us to a certain degree. And what do I mean by that? Teresa has painted something that looks easy, okay? Because there's splatters everywhere. All right, but could she possibly splatter exactly like she wants to? I don't know if anybody can do that. There's a lot of movement going on here, and she's able to control that movement. Now, us being watercolors know that that's very difficult. All right. But the general public, who I talk a lot about, because I don't know if you know, but the general public draws about like a 10-year-old. All right. And that's just a fact. That comes straight out of Betty Edwards' drawing on the right side of the brain. Okay. So what happens with the 10-year-old thinking public is they look at this and it looks like it's just spontaneous. Teresa can just throw paint and come out with a perfect portrait. Okay. But we know that Teresa must have a lot of training and a lot of skills to maintain these pieces of color and drips and drops of paint. And she gives us this contrast of a calm person who has energy coming from them. All right. So I'm not sure what the combination is between fire and ice, but I get it between calm painting and throne painting, between the calmness of his forehead that is, having a highlight right on top of it versus the beard that is spitting out from below. So this piece is very much an active piece. He's sitting on a diagonal, okay? We recognize him, and he is kind of looking at the viewer. So he's having a moment with the viewer, and we're having a moment with him. So very nice piece. Jim? Twilight Dreaming. This piece, I did have to, I'll admit, it was interesting to choose the show, then get to go see the show in terms of what was chosen from the computer images, also to see how the pieces were framed. I got to go back to George James. Remember, George James hit me on my frame. So, I did, and I'm going to tell Linda and I'll tell Jim and everybody, I like the fact that you guys were able to choose your own frames. Uh, a lot of shows these days tell you what kind of frame you can have, and they're trying to make a show be a good presentation. But who is an artist that conforms? Okay. Most artists do not conform, and yet we want to make our show conform. So I congratulate you for the frames that are on some of these. And of course, we're not seeing the frame per se, but I'm just saying what I like about this and Cord's piece is that our fellow here is leaning against the frame. Okay. He's on a diagonal. Again, young painters, if you're a young painter, uh, a horizontal line is very, very quiet. A straight up and down line is a strong line, but it's balanced. And a diagonal line is one that creates excitement. Okay. So we've created some excitement here. We've got a background, again, high contrast, very much like the Admiral's piece that we saw before. We've got a high contrast. We need that high contrast to turn the light on. The high contrast has turned the light on with this person. And so the hat, very three-dimensional. Again, he's not contemplating the viewer. We're contemplating him as if we're a fly on the wall. Interesting too, he's very three-dimensional, and yet the background is very two-dimensional. And I would like to talk to Anne maybe sometime about how this piece was created, in the fact that it appears there's a clean underpainting in the background, and then there seems to be this dark overpainting that allows that light to pass through these slight bits of color. So once again, we are concentrating. I love the hat. I love the sleeve where we get this focal point around his glasses and around his face, and it takes those darks to turn that light on. All right, Jim.
Russell, I will say that we do have some rules about mattes in particular being white or cream colored. Do you think that that's a reasonable compromise?
I do think that's a reasonable compromise. That may be your saving thought there that pulls the pieces together. Also, you're not fighting the color that would be in the piece. So that's a great point. A neutral frame, or excuse me, neutral matte that the frame becomes the artist's choice. It's a great point. So, quite a different subject matter here with Crystal and Grapes by Frank Spino. So I look at this piece, and I'm sure there were a few still lifes in. I love still lifes. What happens with these pieces is that I'm having a tendency here to read from left to right. And our paintings, most people, in terms of English speaking people, read paintings from left to right as you would read a book. And I begin in the upper left hand corner with the dark grapes and the highlights that are there. And I leak out. As I leak out from the white and the red cloth, it leads me to the crystal. Now, interesting, you have to be careful here because the crystal has a bullseye in it. And if Frank paints this bullseye too strong, then he's captured my eye and it can't get out. And I'm just there and I'm stuck. But what happens is Frank has this highlight that passes from the bullseye all the way to the left-hand side and folds back into the cherries, or either back down, or excuse me, grapes, and moves us around again. So, does this have a story? Well, this is sort of like, when you think about the painting that I did with the trailer. the reflections that happen with the airstream. And the reason I say that is because I don't know who this belongs to. This may be Frank's grandmother's crystal. It may be something special to someone else. He's created, though, a still life that allows me to travel around. And again, it's just like anybody else who would enjoy a floral. They're going to enjoy the flowers for the sake of flowers. If you enjoy light and what light does to crystal and what it does to still lifes, you're going to enjoy this piece, but this piece may have deeper meaning for Frank himself. So it'd be interesting to find that out. All right, Jim? So rose backlit, 6, Rachel. This could be considered a non-objective piece. Seems to be inspired, obviously, by roses. Would I know that from just looking at the piece? Maybe. So literal qualities, not a lot of literal qualities other than what I'm getting from the title. Titles are important. I will tell you this, that if you are in competitions a lot of times, I don't know that a single judge will always know the title or look for a title, but I will tell you that if you are in a plein air competition, the buyer usually does pay attention to the title. So it's something you might want to think about, is I try to really push my titles. I've had people who have come to me and said, I love that title, and I bought it because of the title. So if you're interested in selling your artwork, it's something that you might want to think about. I actually did a sailboat one time in Easton, Maryland, and the sun was just coming up, just hitting the water, still early morning, and the sailboat was there almost in darkness. And I titled it The Calling because I felt like the sailboat was ready to go. It was eager to go. And sure enough, the lady who bought it said, oh my gosh, that's my son's sailboat. And he loves to sail. He would sail every day if he could. And the fact that you titled it The Calling just put the icing on the cake. So here, the title is talking about a rose being backlit. And when I squint at this, again, why do we squint? We squint to be able to get rid of some of the details, to be able to see the value in this in terms of lights and darks. And when I look at this, we're held by the warm yellow light that is 3/4 of the way at the top. But I think the one thing that Rachel has done here that is a great thing and something that everybody needs to think about in their own painting, regardless of what you're painting, and that is she has put a little bit of darkness at the top, which is put literally a canister top on this piece, and it's holding the light in. Now, again, I wish I could show you on Zoom, but this would happen if I were doing a street scene and the street's coming towards me. I would get darker on that street towards the bottom of the painting. If there is a stream and I'm painting a stream and it's coming towards me, I will get darker on the bottom because that darkness will hold the light in and get the viewer to jump from that darkness to the light in the painting. So what has she done here? She has calmed down the lights on the outer edges, and she's played up the light on the interior, and she's captured it with both the darkness at the top and the bottom. So again, capturing the light. Notice that, again, I hope you see that I'm doing this off the cuff a little bit here, that as I talk, because I'm reminding myself as I talk. But notice that I'm not talking too much about what I like, okay? If I tell you I like hot dogs, what does that tell you? I used to ask my class, what does that tell you about hot dogs? Oh, the class would say, oh, that means they're good. And I would say, well, wait a minute. What if I tell you I like Doomaflotchers? I love Doomaflochers. The class would look at me funny and they say, well, what is that? I said, it doesn't matter. I'm telling you, I love them. Okay. So what's happening is if I tell you I like Rachel's piece, I'm not talking about Rachel's piece. I'm talking about me. So in your art criticism, try not to talk about what you like because that's talking about yourself. Try to pick out what's in the artwork that is working. And that's what I'm trying to do with Rachel's piece. Okay. All right. Jim? Okay. J.M. Littleton, see me in the light of the sun. See me in the light of the sun. So again, I appreciate my teachers. I appreciate what I've learned from others. J.M. Littleton here may have learned some things from Dylan Pierce. I love Dylan Pierce's work, and I actually have a Dylan Pierce. I've taught with him. So I understand that this image has a very strong feeling of light and atmosphere, which Dylan Pierce is able to capture, but J.M. Littleton has been able to do the same thing. And the giraffes look away. They don't look at me, they look away, and one is moving away. So we have this tendency to get involved with following this animal into the sunlight. See me in the sunlight. Again, how influenced am I by this piece? Well, I was just in South Africa in August, and I saw lots of giraffes in the sunlight and in the moonlight as well. Did that have an effect on me? I can't say. Again, I found it interesting to look back at the pieces that I chose after the show. And if you haven't had the chance to judge a show, that might be something that you've missed out in your own repertoire of a learning experience. Is you look at 400 pieces and you pick out your 100, there's going to be some similarities. Speaking of that, I will go ahead and tell you that Jim and I had to work together to make sure I did not put in two pieces by the same person. Okay. And that became very tricky because there were no names. I could not recognize. I just had to pass it from Jim to me to say, hey, is there anything that I've double checked on? So just be aware that if you were to choose 100 yourself, what is the tendency that you have? What is the underlying factor, the really hidden bias maybe that you have that you don't even know and you're not aware of? All right. Okay, Jim.
So good memories here, Russell. I think about the 10th time that we had to iterate on eliminating duplicates, we were both about ready to be done with that.
All right. So we are now getting into the top awards. And this piece was a special award for creativity in watercolor, which I understand was in honor of Skip Lawrence, who was an experimenter himself in terms of watercolor. And I congratulate Joanna for this piece. The poet is a funnel. The poet is a funnel. Again, notice the title. The title encourages me to think deeper. And when I look at this piece, obviously there is lots of experimentation going on in terms of how the medium is handled. We've got wet on wet in the background. We've got high contrast. We've got values that are being pushed. So lots of things happening with technical qualities. Literal qualities, we've got super realism, not necessarily photographic, but close enough to photographic realism. And the reason I say that, sometimes with a photograph, the problem with photographs and the challenge of photographs is that photographs most of the time are equally in focus. So you're going to have something in the left-hand corner just as much in focus of the right-hand corner and so forth and so on. Now, granted, you're going to have professional photographers who don't do that. But if chances are we are not professional photographers, but I do try to tweak my photographs to look at them more as a painting. I also try to tweak my drawings, my thumbnail sketches to push them more towards a look of a painting and not just repeating a photograph. So we certainly are not looking at a photograph here that is a still life or anything. We're looking at multiple images of the same person in movement. And there's just lots to discover in this piece. So in terms of expressive qualities, notice that the person in the bottom on the far left, she contemplates the viewer, and she contemplates the viewer as if she has empathy for me. Okay. Matter of fact, I don't know how close you've looked at this piece, but look just down below her folded hands on the left, and you will see she is pointing right at me. So it's like she's calling me out, but she's not. It's almost like she's saying, "Are you listening?" And so as I listen, look what she does. She then moves to the second level and she gets sort of an introverted feeling towards herself. So this in itself, yes, it might be about poetry, and that's the beauty of it. It could be about singing. It could be about playing an instrument. It could be about painting. It's about poetry only because Joanna has told us this. But she does put the pencil there. Okay. And the pencil is there about writing, I'm assuming. And then look at what uh, Grace does. By the way, her name is Grace. We see that. And is that not the perfect name? My goodness. So Grace then looks upward, okay, with her poetry. And why does she look upward? Because she's not calling me out now. She's not even calling herself out. She's calling the universe out. She's looking up and beyond where we can go, up into that right-hand corner, you know? And this is a fabulous piece, and I congratulate her on it. And I know Skip Lawrence would be proud of it himself. So again, fabulous piece. Jim? All right. So Stacy here with Dream in Green. I did notice, and again, some of you may have already noticed, that there were multiple choices that had a dreamscape, a storyline, um, a deeper meaning. Again, these things hearken to the judge to not only look at literal qualities, important formal qualities, technical qualities, but expressive qualities. Okay. And again, not expressive qualities that I'm feeling, but what is the artwork, what emotion is the artwork projecting? So I look at this piece, and we've got one of these pieces that we have the inside going out. If you look in the upper right-hand window, we've got the outside coming in. If you look in the obvious lower hand corner on both sides, wrapping around this person, fabulous painting of a figure, once again at a diagonal, also with a strong light source, also surrounded by lots of lights. I congratulate again Stacy in terms of giving this uh, color on white, and yet, it's like, well, what is the color of white? And we see that white is generated from the very subtle grays that she has. but also the uh, the repetition of the pillows and the texture of the pillows, the fact that she can get light on the pillow and still show the contrast of the light of the person. Notice how the shoulder has a light shoulder but dark behind it, and then the head is lit even though it's in shadow. I'm feeling the reflected light coming off of the sheet itself back onto the girl. Okay, so lots of things that are happening here visually and successfully in regards of telling the story that is here in Dream in Green. All right, Jim. So I think we're coming to our uh, final two pieces here that Jim and I have talked about, or at least the ones that I also chose to talk about. So before I get into the last two, I am happy to chit chat with you if you have questions in regards to bringing those up in just a little bit. You know, with Jim, with the chat, I can't see how that's going right now. So I'm just saying I would be happy to talk with you on that or to discuss some imageries. But here we go. So the last two, this is the Silver Medal Award, Whiskey Reflections, Susan Stuller. And again, interesting that the last piece uh, by Stacy, we had also an inside out relationship. And here with this piece, Whiskey Reflections, we have an inside out going on again. The umbrellas, I hope you have experienced this before, and that is if you've ever experienced the display of umbrellas in the street at night, or even during the daytime or whatever, is really effective. I've been in European countries where the umbrellas were hanging across the streets, and we have that imagery here. We have the reflection, so we've got both the umbrellas that are real in the very upper part of the painting, and then we have the reflections of the umbrellas that are down below. We get some words here. We get some script. And we see saloon, we see whiskey bar and grill. Um, and notice that Susan is sharp enough to know that if she gets rid of some of that word, some of those letters, then we as the viewer become more involved with the piece because we have to read it. We have to put our 2 cents worth in it. And then as we do that, we move around and we see, oh, this is not just about something I'm seeing. This is something that other people are seeing because I look down and I see their reflection. Okay. And so this means those people must be behind me. And so they're kind of looking at the scene as well. I guess they could be inside the building, but we are looking at a reflection here. So she's also downplayed these people where you need to be aware that if you put people in, you got to be careful if you don't want them to be the focal point. And so she's been able to take away the people as the focal point because I would recognize them and my brain would say, oh, people, you got to look, you got to look. Okay. But she's downplayed that to where I discover them. And that's part of the discovery of the painting. The umbrellas, the words moving down to the people and the discovery. Notice even the lights, and I'm assuming that maybe candlelight, possibly the look of chandeliers that moves us down towards the people. So, and as I talk, I notice that the bar is at a diagonal, okay, that is going underneath saloon. It is not at a perfect parallel, and neither are the verticals that are going up. So again, you see, I don't know who my audience is tonight. I don't know if my audience is a young painter or a person who's just beginning to paint or a person who's painted way more years than I have. but I'm just showing you things as a teacher that when I look at this, I recognize some of the things that Susan is doing here on purpose. It's not like this happened accidentally, okay? And so that is how I'm judging the work, is not on my opinion, trying not to be too much on my opinion as much as I am judging my own know-how of seeing what Susan is doing here that I would do and try to achieve in my paintings as well. And she's done that very successfully. So congratulations to her. All right. Well, that brings us to the gold medal. Daddy's nap time. Kathy DeWalt. Um, so again, storytelling with paint, but we're not looking at anything that is near photographic per se. Uh, we are looking at something that is almost puzzle-like, that is being put together, both texture-wise, pattern-wise. Notice the diagonals. We've got the diagonals that are going, and they are allowing us to have the action, even though the action is sleeping. It puts us on a diagonal. There is some simplicity here that I can appreciate. Sometimes I wish I could paint it myself because I get way too busy, and I know I'm not the only person that has overworked a piece. Okay. And I'm not sure how Kathy decided when to stop working on this piece. Okay. But it is not overworked, and it has that simplistic feel to it. Um, and when I look at it, I start trying to imagine the story that she's telling me, not a story of my own, but I'm trying to relate to what Kathy's saying here. She's telling me that this fella is sleeping, okay? But he's got one hand on another child who's not quite asleep, the one at the bottom. Notice that his eyes are still open, all right? So it's not all three are sleeping, and she got that with the title. It's Daddy's nap time. So he puts his hand on the one child, comforts that child. He's comforted through his own comfort, okay, if you will. But then the key is that he holds the baby, but look what the baby does. The baby contemplates us. It's like, do you see who's holding me here? Do you see who's got me? All right. I don't know what your experience is with religious art. Uh, I did have one class that was Sienese art history, St. Catherine, and we were studying art, religious art of ancient times. And so what they would do is they would paint Jesus, and Mary would be looking, Joseph would be looking at Mary, Mary would be looking at Jesus, and Jesus would be looking at the viewer. Okay. And so the idea is, who's responsible for understanding the religion? You are, because Jesus is looking at you. Okay. So I'm looking at this piece, and it's kind of similar in the fact that Kathy has this child contemplating me as dad sleeps. And it's like, here is the family. And how do I know that? It's because I look down at the very bottom, and there's dad's wedding ring. Okay. So uh, I congratulate Kathy on this piece, the puzzle piece of putting this together in terms of the format and the pieces and the color harmony and the quiet aspect of it is a fabulous painting. And I congratulate her. But I also congratulate all of you in terms of getting in the show, and then an award being icing on the cake. And I hope that you will always be appreciative of those who have gone before you. Jim?
Thank you, Russell. Now, I'm hoping that there isn't some other window that I can't see that has 1,000 questions piled up. But I do have a couple here. Back when you were talking about the poet as a funnel, we did have one person ask or note the possibility that maybe instead of, I guess, reading from lower left to upper right, maybe the other way around. Maybe the poet is uh, starting in the heavens and then turning her gaze towards us.
Well, that is certainly a possibility. And I do, again, if I am talking to people who are unaware, I think we do have a tendency to read from left to right and from bottom to top. That is probably a cultural thing, obviously, because if you're in a Japanese culture, you're going to basically reverse that. So it's a great point and certainly could be done that way. And there are no absolute rules there. But in terms of our own culture, interesting, the piece that we're looking at right now with Kathy is very similar. I feel like we move from bottom left to upper right until we see the person, and then his arm brings us back down. So again, just one opinion, and happy to entertain other opinions. But if we can find some logic behind it, then we get to break the rule. If we don't know the rule, then the rule isn't our friend. We want to at least adhere to the knowledge and then make up our mind based on the knowledge.
Thanks. Russell, when you are looking at, say, the top 3 or 4 paintings, uh, are you giving thought to how they work with each other, or are you just thinking of them one at a time?
Absolutely thinking of them one at a time. Um, and so we can talk a little bit about how this transpired. I judged this in as the artwork was not as it was hanging now, but as it was presented in various rooms. So I moved from room to room. And then I began to bring pieces that I felt like were, I guess, the most worthy pieces towards the same room. Then I took what I felt like were the highest quality pieces in that particular room, separated them from others, and then pulled them out to try to individualize them. So I guess in a way, if you were watching me judge the show, you might have thought that I was actually grouping things. But I don't know that that would have been the possibility had it not been individual rooms separating the actual pieces. But eventually I got the top, I guess, 5 or 6 pieces and brought them into the same room and then really started to try to focus on, okay, what is happening that makes this piece a tad stronger than another piece, and then go from there. So it does get very difficult, and you almost have to start analyzing yourself as to why am I choosing this? Why? What is it? What is my gut reaction telling me, and why is it telling me that? Because I think you do have a gut reaction to pieces, but then sometimes are you even able to understand that gut reaction yourself?
And is that LIT checklist just cycling through your head the whole time?
Not even per se. Uh, Again, when you've got something embedded in your head, uh, just to tell you, my dissertation was done in 1990. So it's not like that is over and over and it's a hardcore rule. It's almost like tonight. tonight I couldn't talk about LITE in terms of each piece, or I would have probably bored you to death. But I talk fluidly, and it's almost like if you were to take the recording and divide it up, you probably could say, oh, now he's talking about L, now he's talking about important formal qualities, now he's talking about technical qualities. You could probably pull out those things. So I guess my thoughts are a good bit more fluid than always thinking pure LITE. But it is, I think, a good way of discussing criticism with students.
Well, looking at the clock, I think we're about where we wanted to be. Didn't have a lot of questions, but my view of that is you were pretty interesting the whole way through. So I was pretty happy to just keep listening to you. It was quite interesting, Russell. Um, I want to thank you so much for everything you've done for us this year. It's been a long road, and but it's been really rewarding for me, hopefully for you, and hopefully for everybody in BWS. And I'm starting to see a lot of thank yous come through on the chat here. So I think there's strong feelings all around on that.
Great, great. Well, I appreciate it, and I certainly enjoyed it, and I learned a lot myself.
All righty. Well, with that, I think we can call it an evening. Uh, Thank you again, Russell, for everything. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this chat. I'll remind you that keep an eye on the website. Eventually, we'll get this out for everybody to look at again at their leisure. And everybody have a great evening.